Okay, I can do
into the
that.
block.
No, I don't have voting privileges on mine.
No, but he could log in.
Yeah, you're right. You could.
Why don't you two swap chairs for chairs? Dennis, you sit over here for a little bit.
No. No.
How do you change computers? Here,
Otherwise, we could operate, Steve.
I can just do a voice vote. Yeah, let's just do that. Yeah, I'll just do voice. You guys, everybody else.
We'll do everybody voice.
Everybody
vote.
that way, it's easier? Okay, I'll keep working on it while we're going.
So at this time, I will call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome everyone here this evening. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is to consider this agenda this evening. Are there any changes or additions or deletions?
Move to approve, Mr. Mayor.
Motion by Steve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by David to approve the agenda. We'll move to a voice vote. We have a technical issue, so we'll go by voice votes this evening until that's corrected. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. The next item would be a consider approval of the minutes of the last regular council meeting that was held on December 19th. The council does have the minutes of that meeting. Are there any corrections? If not, is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Jim, seconded by John to approve as they have been presented. Move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We'll then move to agenda item number 4, which is the consent agenda. The items on the screen on the consent agenda include consider the resolution designating the official newspaper, consider the approval of the 2018 workers' compensation insurance renewal, consider the resolution amending resolution 4457, consider the resolution designating the official depositories for city funds for 2018, consider the amendments to the data practices policy, consider the adoption of the resolution appointing a responsible authority and assigning duties under the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act, and then consider the bills and the project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants to remove for purposes of separate discussion?
Number 6.
Any other item? So we'll move agenda item number 6 to a regular agenda that will then become agenda item number 11. The remaining items on the consent agenda are 5 through 10. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig to approve the items on the consent agenda. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Or all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now, agenda item number 11, which was agenda item number 6. Jim?
I had this taken out because as Carla and I were chatting, our mod rating has gone down tremendously. And I don't know if a lot of folks understand how mod ratings work with workers' comp. In 2016, correct me if I'm wrong when I say this, Carla, but in 2016, our mod rating is a 1.10, with 1 being the average. So our workers' comp insurance that year was higher than average. I don't know, I think you said Sheila had implemented working on this. And you can comment on that, but our mod rating for 2017 went down to a 0.87, and then I think payable 2018 is down to a 0.67, which is a tremendous amount of savings. I think it's over $29,000 that we're saving on our workers' comp by what was done. And Carla, if you'd like to, show the savings and the expenses, I think it's worth expressing.
So in 2016, our audited premium, is $268,491 with a mod rating of 1.1. Our mod rating is based on our accidents for workers' comp. So in 2015, we had higher incidents for workers' comp. So that would affect our 2016 mod rating. Our modifier then at 1.1 actually cost us another $3,304 for our premiums. So it was an addition to. In 2017, our premium estimate is $235,835. That won't be audited till the first quarter of this year. So that's the estimate we paid. But our modifier came down to 0.81, which actually saves us $67,798 from our premium. So that reduces our premium. And then 2018, our estimated premium is down to $206,808 with a modifier of 0.67, which now we get to take to get to that 206, we get to take another $124,621 off of the overall estimated premium. So from 2017 to 2018, we're saving about $29,000, but from 2016 to 2018, we're saving $61,683. So we do have a safety committee that meets regularly, and they look at what our incidents are, and Sheila Dubbs, our HR, is also on that committee, and she watches that as well. And so they've been implementing different safety items, so you can see that has affected our overall workers' comp.
Yeah, and thank you, Jim, for bringing that
And
up.
that's really kind of, because that's a big issue, you know, in business side of it. I don't know if a lot of folks understand that, but when your mod gets over 1, as a city council, to us, when you say that's unacceptable, because that's a huge cost to our taxpayers. And I just want to commend the staff who have brought that down, who have worked on the safety. They deserve that recommendation or recognition.
So we should also think about that going forward when we try to save money on the one hand by doing our own projects instead of bidding them out. Because if we do one of those projects and somebody gets hurt, there goes your mod. It goes up again. So
It is something that one has to weigh into as the cost and balances. Because I know as a subcontractor or as a contractor, we don't do our own concrete work for that fact because it's
dangerous.
well, it's not really listed in my work, and it just would push up my expenses too high.
Sure.
So, but I just wanted to
Thank you.
recognize that, and we need to be aware of that as we do projects.
Very good. And so special thanks to the staff, the employees
Carla?
that worked on this.
Maybe we want to stay there.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask her some more questions,
Yes.
so I thought maybe she should just stay there.
Absolutely.
I was looking at some of the individual rates and premium rates here for like the airport operations. Last year it was $7,766, and this year $13,766, and evidently that's because of salaries and so forth. Added additional employees or something to cause the big increase in the premium.
That salary is also how we break out certain of our staff. So our supervisor level, we break Dean Kudrin. He gets over our airport, over our streets. So the way we break out his salary will also affect those rates and how much time he spends in each area.
So by just reclassifying him as part of his salary from one area to another, it makes a difference in the premiums.
Also, all of our staff, most of our staff, will actually on our timesheet, it's 100% reporting, so they'll report where they're working. So when they audit that, it comes out of the payroll. So that's actually what he worked in 2017. So that's based on the salaries, how they're laid out in 2017 paid.
Because it looks like the compensation there in the airport operations went from $131,000 to $228,000, which is a substantial increase in the compensation there. And that's just reclassification.
Yeah, that's just where he put his time into.
Okay. The other one that stood out in my mind is the swimming pool. It went from $5,125 to $12,884, and the compensation there for the swimming pool went from $99,900 all the way up to $246,000 for swimming pool and beach operations. It seems like a big difference in the compensation.
I wonder if they didn't put the city arena operations under the 9015.
So 9015 is a couple of places, a couple categories there.
It is. And they didn't break it out. I don't see that they broke out our city arena operations. They had that under code 9182 last year, and now it appears this year they don't have that broke out. I'm wondering if I can look into that, but my guess would be that they put it under 9015.
Okay. Anyway, those are my questions, yeah.
Very good. Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion for the approval of the workers' comp insurance renewal.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Steve. Discussion?
I'm on.
If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 12. Agenda item number 12 is the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities 2016 legislative update representing the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. And with us tonight is Marty Seifert. Marty?
Great. Good afternoon. I feel like this is kind of an intimate setting here up front. My name is Marty Seifert. I live in Marshall in Ward 1, and I am here to present on behalf of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. There is a packet that was dropped with the city, and you guys should have had that, and there's one being handed around right now that we'll just talk about quickly, and certainly feel free to answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to reference this document inside of your packet that says Outcome of CGMC Priorities. This is the agenda that was set, mainly our exec board through our fall conference. They discuss with the people that attend the conference. As many of you know, Councilman David Strzok represents Marshall on the board of the CGMC. And we try to keep good mainstream bipartisan positions on things that we feel are achievable. Local government aid has been a long-time issue of the coalition. The goal that they laid out we thought was achievable, which was getting back to the funding where we were in 2002. This is not adjusted for inflation or anything like that. Just get back to where we were back then. There has been a formula modification. I think some of you know that cities that have some growth, grow out of LGA a little bit. So Marshall's increase is not, substantial. We did end up with a $15 million increase, so we did get about a third of what we asked for. And I think the people in this room know that you don't get everything you ask for in government. And the legislature went through all the proposals of requests, and we did get a $15 million increase. That translates into almost $40,000 increase for the city of Marshall under the formula. The workforce housing credit is something that we've had some of our mayors discuss about this being a critical need where there's market failure, particularly in cities like Perham, where they've got people driving from long ways away and the market's not apparently working in some of these areas. The tax credit did not pass. The TIF authorization allows cities to kind of use that as a tool in the toolbox did pass. And then there was a small grant program for $2 million that was started as kind of a pilot project just to see how it works. And that will be sunsetted. So that is only going to be available until 2021, and that program will be sunsetted. The legislature, and when I was there, I'm just going to be honest with you, I always thought it was good to put sunsets in programs. So if they're not working, they go away. And if they are, then the legislature has to review it and reapprove it. If it's not a good idea, they won't do it. So they did put a sunset on that in 2021. Clean water infrastructure, this has been a vexing issue. It has really risen to be one of our top issues is regulatory reform that's driving up the costs. Marshall is kind of facing this right now with our phosphorus standards. I'm sure the Public Works folks there. And I met with Brad Roos 2 weeks ago about this. And it's a combination of things. Cities that don't have the economy of scale to be able to pay for these large water infrastructure improvements. And then on the flip side, the reform issue. So in the blocks that you see, I'm going to kind of cover these together. The loan and grant program and the environmental regulatory reform kind of all go hand in hand. So the grant program, we supported the $167 million. That was very bipartisan. And when it comes to bonding, the legislature now under Republican control generally believes more in the broad-based infrastructure funding of things like water funding and roads and bridges and so forth. And so they really put a big effort into the clean water program. We ended up getting $116 million, which is a large appropriation in the PSEG program and the related water programs. Marshall is toward the top of the list right now under the Public Facilities Authority. If we can get a like appropriation for this coming year, I do believe that Marshall will be successful. We did lobby to increase the grant cap, which hadn't been done for many years, so that was at $5 million. Now it's at $7 million for the Point Source Implementation Grant Program, or PSIG program, and that maxes out at $7 million, but that certainly would help Marshall quite a bit. On the regulatory reform side, the coalition believes that there are a lot of regulations been put in place by the Pollution Control Agency, which we don't believe are backed by valid science or independent scientific peer review. The regulations go above and beyond what we think the Clean Water Act calls for on the federal level, which is mandating us to the state, which is mandating to you to the cities on what to do. We believe the phosphorus rule is flawed in a couple different ways. The city of Mankato has led a lot of the opposition to some of the new regulations that have come down, but we were unsuccessful in getting the governor to sign any of our bills. We did have all of our bills incorporated into the original set of environmental omnibus bills that were carried through to the legislature that were all vetoed in early May. The legislature then reconvened for a second set of bills, and the omnibus environment bill only included an extra 30 days for cities to analyze and comment on permits and the impaired water list. All the other proposals on independent scientific review, regulatory review, cities being able to petition for opposition to mandates, and then have an independent scientific review done as a result of that, were all rejected because of the Pollution Control Agency and the governor being opposed to that. The next item is the BDPI program, which is generally a but-for test of if you're going to have a business move to your community or expand in your community and add new jobs. This is for the public side to maybe add a service road, a sewer line, a water pipe. The legislature appropriated and a bill was signed for $12 million on that, which is one of the biggest increases we've had. And that's a broad bipartisan bill, kind of because we have such high tax rates in the state to try to make up for that. On the backside is all of the transportation items. We did have the second largest transportation bill that we've had in probably the last decade or 15 years. This is mainly financed out of the general fund. The coalition focused very much on road, bridge, and city streets, which is what, we take our orders from you guys. Your board tells us what to lobby for. We stayed out of the whole metro funding for Metro Transit. If they want to pay for it, fine. We didn't get involved any more than that. If they want to pay for it out of their own dime, we just didn't want the rural area subsidizing Metro Transit was kind of our position. We did get an additional amount of money for the Highway User Fund. Corridors of Commerce, which are these long stretches of road that connect major communities in rural Minnesota, Highway 23 being one of those. That was actually, the final bill had $300 million in trunk highway bonds. That's one-time funding, and of course, if you're going to do one-time funding, roads is the perfect place to do it in because you bid out the road, you get it built. It's not like you're starting a program where you're enrolling people in a program and 2 years later you're throwing them off the program. So roads and bridges are a perfect place for one-time money to go, whether it be bonding, trunk highway bonding, or cash. And so the legislature actually put in more money than what we had discussed with them, but they put it in at a one-time basis versus we were looking for an ongoing basis. The important part about the $25 million in cash for Corridors of Commerce is there are certain things that you cannot bond for. Engineering, design, in some cases right-of-way acquisition. So that cash is very important, and that is an ongoing appropriation every year forever as long as the legislature just reestablishes the DOT bill. Under city streets, we asked for $25 million a year for cities over 5,000 and under 5,000. Now, I think a lot of you know that the gas tax formula gives 9% of the gas tax goes to cities of over 5,000 in the state of Minnesota, and our Constitution requires that in the formula. The odd part of that is if you fill up your gas tank in Marshall, 9 cents of that gas tax goes back to you. I don't know how much money do we get out of that, like $500,000?
Yep, 700,000.
700,000 the city of Marshall gets. If I go to Minneota or Granite Falls and I fill up my tank over there, they get zero. And there's kind of a fundamental unfairness to that. I know I'm talking to the Marshall Council, but the CGMC you guys are a coalition, so Marshall has been very supportive that we want to see fairness in the gas tax formula. We know we're not going to amend the Constitution because that's cumbersome and expensive and long. And so we came up with the idea of using general fund appropriations for these smaller cities to get city street money just like Marshall does. And what the legislature did is, after all the dust settled, is they got $8 million a year for 2 years when we requested $25 million a year forever. But at least it's a start. And so one of our goals is to come back and try to increase that appropriation, make it more permanent, and then also try to get some money for cities over 5,000. But we understand the legislature is going to tell us, look, you guys get money out of the constitutional formula, so we're not as sympathetic. I'm just being honest. So otherwise, we have an additional handout that talks about LGA appropriations over time. And then another item that was always in our standing platform for CGMC, this isn't really a city issue, it's a business issue. But if you look at this chart that has kind of the flow chart, on the bottom part, the state business property tax levy for businesses goes to the state of Minnesota. It does not go to the city of Marshall, the school district, or the county. And the CGMC has always felt that this burdens small business people. The chamber has always been big on trying to get the CI tax reduced. And what we lobbied for, and actually was successful in passing, was that your first $100,000 of value would be exempt. So your Main Street businesses that aren't worth a whole lot, especially in the smaller towns like your Minneota and your Granite Falls, Milroy, whatever, they see a $700 tax cut. And then the really expensive properties get about a $700 tax cut. But we always felt that the small Main Street business owners are more burdened as a percentage of what they own versus the larger business. This wasn't necessarily smiled upon by the larger businesses or the big, I don't want to say the big chamber, but there's like some of these bigger business groups, and I think all of you understand that the Mall of America getting a $100,000 exemption is not seen as a great win. But as you guys look down your Main Street here in Marshall, another $700 rattling around in their pocket's a good thing. And so we did support that, and that is successful, and that will be permanently implemented starting this year.
Marty, my recollection, that was originally put on when there was a deficit at the state, and it was intended to be temporary.
Yes, that was one of those temporary taxes that never turned out to be temporary. So we at least got some modification for those small businesses. Correct. What kind of questions might you guys have?
Well, first off, thank you, Marty. We appreciate the work that the coalition does and that you personally do for the coalition, so thank you. Questions?
I just have a couple of questions here. One of the items was no ongoing general fund revenues for highways. I was wondering if you could explain that. I mean, the legislature evidently is taking some general fund revenues and putting them into the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund, and you're opposed to that, and maybe you could explain that.
Yeah, the board had some discussion on this, and David might be able to tell us more. I think there was a lot of discussion about if the general fund had money taken out for transportation, that it would impact other things like local government aid or some of these other things that the CGMC wanted. And they, originally I think they said a limited amount out of the general fund, and then it kind of changed to no amount. And I don't know if you remember the discussion on that.
Yeah,
I remember sitting in on the conference call.
Squeezing the balloon problem.
Right.
More here, but they'll take it out of our height there.
Right. So that was what the board is. When I was in the legislature, maybe I had a different opinion on that. But at the end of the day, the legislature kind of decides what is the priority, and they decided that highways were a priority. And so when you look at the $173 million in there, they used the discussion that the sales tax on auto parts is related to transportation, and so they wanted to start moving that money that flows into the general fund that goes to pay for schools and nursing homes and all sorts of other prisons, and divert that over to highways because they feel there's a nexus or a connection between auto part sales and highways and roads. And it makes some sense, frankly.
Because, I mean, a lot of people feel like we need to spend more on our highways and so forth, and here they're trying to do it. And And I was just wondering about your position there about not using those funds for the
Yeah,
highway.
we didn't have, I mean, we didn't come scream from the rooftops on that. And the main thing is it's always easier when there's a surplus. I think we would have had a harder time saying, hey, this works for us if there was a deficit and they reduced some of these other things that we're working on, like water funding or LGA or whatever. With a surplus, to me, it made some sense. But
And I should have added in the introduction, thank you, David Strzok, for serving on the board, representing not only Marshall, but other communities on the board. Other questions for Marty?
One of the issues we're going to be talking tonight about is the revolving loan fund that was seeded by the state-funded Minnesota Investment Fund. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that particular program, whether it was a good program or whether it should be continued or whether it was...
Yeah, the MIF fund is run through DEED now. It used to be DTED when I was in the legislature. There's some good things that it's done. I mean, I think certainly you need to be scrupulous in how the money is spent, and I always say the but-for test, that, you know, if the government were not involved in this, would this be happening anyway? There's some good questions that need to be asked, but MIF has generally been a pretty successful program. The legislature backed off of it quite a bit 2 years ago, and then they looked at some of the, what I would say, the fallout that would happen, and they went back and put money back in again that they thought would disrupt projects that they thought were very critical to be done.
Well, I see that the legislature is allowing us to take 80% out of there and spend it for a legal purpose, and then they want 20% back for the state. And so when you see something like that, you're wondering what happened here, that all of a sudden they're saying take the money, use it for something else, and just give us 20% of it. So is there a history behind that?
I don't remember the discussion on that, but it strikes me a little, I don't know what discussion you guys have had about it, but I didn't follow that one real close. It strikes me as a bit odd.
And this will be a little bit later agenda item, so you can stick around for that discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Any
no,
other questions for Marty?
You can always get a hold of me. You know where I live. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Marty.
Move then to agenda item number 13. Agenda item number 13, consider the application for a temporary on-sale intoxicating liquor license for SMSU Foundation for an event February 9, 2018. Are there any questions about this? Not. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 14. Agenda item number 14 is Minnesota Investment Fund, revolving loan fund, the request for the one-time exception. So to begin this discussion, Carla Drown, Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Like you had recently discussed, we have the MIF, Minnesota Investment Fund, revolving loan funds that the EDA has met on, and they have approved to go forward with this and this one-time exception. So these funds would then be 80% would be released from the state criteria for economic development. So these funds would go into an economic development fund. Tonight we have Kel Brink and Tara Unken from our EDA here to further explain it or answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Carla. And welcome, Cal. And this is probably the first time Tara's been in front of the council, so you can introduce Tara.
I will. Thanks, Mayor, Council, and staff. Glenn, it was perfect timing because some of the questions are the same things that we wanted to answer. For those of you that may not have met Tara, Tara Unken has a little history with us. She started a little over
2 years.
Almost 2 years now, I guess, and was doing the economic development in Ballatin and Tracy, kind of through our Discover Southwest contracts, and has now moved to doing economic development for the city of Marshall. So works closely with me and will eventually take over a lot of those duties as everybody gets to know her and we get her exposed to kind of the Marshall atmosphere. A little background on Tara: she's got a lot of much more education on economic development than I do, and is just passionate about economic development in rural Minnesota, and has done some really, really cool things in the city of Gallatin as well as Tracy in the last couple of years, things that would have never happened had she not been involved. So looking forward to her getting much more involved here. So what we're here tonight to talk about was a little bit Glenn brought up, and one of I guess I'll do a little bit of background and let Tara kind of explain our position on it, but there was some really good successes with the MIF program. What the state started to kind of recognize throughout the state was communities weren't necessarily revolving it. So they would get the money from the state, they would do a loan to a business, that business would pay their monthly fees and interest, we would put that in the revolving loan, and then these communities were just hoarding that money. They weren't putting it back out, and part of the reason is the difficulty of putting it back out there. And John, you and Steve both through EDA, we really looked into why aren't we using that money and why would we want to give any of it back, and it comes down to a couple reasons. There's a lot of loopholes you have to jump through. Only certain businesses qualify, so a retail business on Main Street doesn't qualify because the money has to be industrial, manufacturing, R&D, those types of things, so it's very limited. So one of the things that the state, I think they recognize that let's try to find a way to get some of these communities to put that money back into circulation, but you're going to pay a fee to do that. And it also gets 20% back to the state that they can then put back out. So there was some good programs. We used it in the past. We've had some people that have used it that actually paid it off early because of some of the difficulties and the loopholes and the different hoops that you have to jump through. So we see this as an opportunity there's a couple ways to look at it. Why would we give up $63,000? But there's another way to look at it is it gets us $250,000 that we feel is much more spendable, and we can make it available to a higher population of the business organizations in Marshall. So Tara, if you want to kind of just talk through kind of the conversations we've had at EDA. And
yeah, we didn't make this recommendation lightly. Our EDA kicked it around for, I think, 3 months, 2 or 3 meetings where we really dug into a lot of the details with what does this really mean? Is giving back, you know, $63,000 or whatever the final number will be, is it really a good idea? Because on the surface it seems like, that's a tough pill to swallow. But after looking into a lot of the details, one of the biggest things is with these funds, the Davis-Bacon prevailing wages in this part of the state, I don't want to call it tainting the project, but in a way it taints the project or it turns off people because it can make a project so much more expensive in the cities or a larger metropolitan area. It wouldn't have as significant of an impact. So that was one of the larger setbacks, I guess, with the funds. So I don't know if anybody has any questions in addition to what Cal had mentioned.
One of the things that, Glenn, would probably be of interest to you, and it was for all of us, but the terminology that we really struggled with is where it said for any lawful purpose.
Right.
What is so we threw out some really wild examples to deed, and these weren't recommendations. This isn't where we're recommending spend the money, but Dennis was involved. We threw out, could we buy a cover for the ice at the arena? The answer was yes. Could we buy Christmas lights?
Holiday lights.
Holiday lights.
Decorations.
And the answer was yes. So it's pretty wide open because that was one of our fears is so they get their money back and now nothing's lawful. So it was pretty wide open. So and again, we're not recommending that it be used for those types of things, but I see it as being a way that we could offer some programs to whether it be Main Street or West College Drive, get some of that money. We can still revolve that money. We don't have to give the money out. We can still do loans. We can do low interest loans and keep that money revolving, because I kind of hate to give it all up and then go to zero. But if we put some of that out in loans, we could keep it revolving.
So is the intent to use the $252,000 in the economic development area, or is it any city use? Or
yeah, we would. I think we would probably have to develop a process that we go through the EDA with any recommendation to spend that money. The EDA would approve and bring it to council. And one of the things that just came up that could be a possibility, I think Glenn, this came from your group even, was the city's comprehensive plan that hasn't been updated for years would probably be, something to consider. A lot of times that's farmed out to an organization that does city's comprehensive plans. It might cost $10,000. That would be a legal use of these funds because it would actually promote economic development because you have a better comprehensive plan of where the city's going. So, but I think I would recommend probably that we would use the EDA as kind of the first filter. And then we bring an EDA recommendation to spend any of these dollars would come to council for approval.
With that would it be wise that we have, it sounds like some kind of, pardon me, written policy is probably appropriate. Should that include some language or threshold about how much we keep available for revolving fund as opposed to project-specific outlays? And I don't know I have no idea what the number should be,
actually
but
was a conversation at EDA is, would we make 150 that's available to spend and another 100 that has to revolve? And I don't know that we have to get that concrete in the number, but I think we should have something there.
something, okay.
What we would ask for tonight is just a recommendation to move forward with first of all, determining what's the right date. Should we wait till the last month and let some of the interest, I think what we figured, we only make a couple $100 difference if we wait, but. So, I mean, it might make fiscal sense to wait until June, right till the deadline, and then do it, and get some extra funds in there, and that'd give us a couple months here to put together the actual process of how do we spend the money, how much is available to spend, and then just maybe get a final approval at that time.
And I think there is, there's other examples around the state where they've developed policies, and the Regional Development Commission could be helpful with that too.
I'll just add on that, a lot of revolving loan funds in southwest Minnesota, some of the smaller communities I've worked with, they don't let their revolving loan fund balance go below 30% of their anticipated balance. So if they have $100,000, they'll lend out 70 and they want to keep 30 to help if there's a default or whatever. So we have examples that we could model ours after.
Thank you.
The amount we're talking about, the $316,000, that's, as far as the Fund 212, are there any other outstanding balances in the revolving loan fund other than this money here that we're talking about? Or
no, that's total for 212.
That's a total of everything.
Yep.
I think I've read that some other cities are doing the same thing right now. Is there a trend that most of them are doing this and taking advantage of it? Do you know? Or
I know of a couple that have, and the state offered the one-time exception because they saw that the funds weren't being used. So I've heard of a couple of them that have moved forward, and some of them are doing the same thing that we might do and wait until May or June.
Okay.
One of the key things, two things that I think hampers us from using it, again, is it's not available to everybody. This would make it available to everybody. And then secondly, and probably even more importantly, the ability to not have to use prevailing wage is a huge thing for rural Minnesota. I mean, I saw a bid, real numbers was close to $250,000 without prevailing wage. With prevailing wage, it was $282,000. So it added $30,000 to that bid. So you take a small project in downtown Marshall, you shouldn't have to pay $28 or $32 an hour when you can have somebody that'll do that work. In fact, we're even dealing with one now where potentially a contractor that does that work can't even do that work and qualify to do the work because they have to charge prevailing wage. And it's their own company. So I think it simplifies it. There's nobody that hates to give up $63,000 worse than I do. But when I think about the ability to use the money that we keep, it makes sense.
If you can't use it anyway, what good is it?
And that very point would be the argument for making the move now rather than waiting till June.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we have less money, we're getting more bang for the buck. It's going to be more effective use of the money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Other discussion?
Go ahead. Timely, okay.
I'll move approval of the request for the one-time exemption for the from the Minnesota Investment Fund.
Second.
Motion by David, seconded by Steve. Discussion on the motion?
I just have a question. A lot of times when you have these programs, you see the money out there and it's spent and so forth, and you don't get feedback as to how effective the program ever was in the first place. Do we have actual reports or whatever that show the money that we did receive, here's how much it accomplished, and how the money was spent and how it helped the community?
We have every one of them that we loaned money to or granted money to, and then along with those, there was always a development agreement that had the expectation. Yep.
So that would be good at some point in the future to summarize that.
I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15 is the introduction of the ordinance amendment changing the deck projections into the required yards and call for a public hearing. So again, the action would be the introduction and call for the public hearing. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is one of those where typically we would have in the consent agenda for starting it, but because it's a kind of a relaxation of requirements in the front yard, we thought we'd put it under the new business, discuss it lightly, and I'll do a full discussion at the public hearing. But we believe that, well, I'll get into it at our next meeting concerning why we came forward with this at this time. But it's a relaxation of restrictions for decks in the front yard. That's all I have.
Questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion for the introduction and calling for the public hearing.
So move. Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion
I was going to say,
passes.
just so you're aware, Mayor, the Legislative and Ordinance Committee did spend 3 minutes discussing this matter to bring the recommendation. to full council.
Actually, we beat the 3 minutes. It was under 3 minutes.
Record.
Okay, so agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 16, consider appointments to boards and commissions. Earlier this evening, the council met in special session, and based on interviews, we have an opening on the Airport Commission that we're at this time going to wait with. We have an opening on the Community Services Board that we're not going to act on tonight because there's an additional applicant that will be eligible to be interviewed. And there's 4 individuals that interviewed for one opening that is on the Public Housing Commission, and I would recommend that Patricia Nobin be appointed to the unexpired term that will expire May 31st, 2020 on the Public Housing Commission, and I would offer that as a recommendation and entertain a motion to affirm.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by David. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We had 4 extremely qualified candidates, and there was a lot of discussion over what would be the best. The one thing that I would like to say is that I just appreciate all the involvement from the community members and would encourage all community members of all ages, so long as they are voting age, to come in and participate in these commissions. It's really nice and refreshing to have that kind of involvement and interest in government affairs. So I was very impressed with the candidate group.
Thank you for saying that. Well said. Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 17. Board Commission liaison reports. Actually, mine have not met since we last met. The Fire Relief Association, I believe next week, or it's coming up, has their annual meeting. And Regional Development Commission was to meet this coming Thursday for their monthly meeting, and today postponed their meeting in anticipation of a winter storm. So I have nothing to report. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Library Board met yesterday. Work commitment kept me from attending that. The Merit Center, we actually, with the Senate tour yesterday, spent, I think they initially asked for about a 20-minute presentation, and they were out there for almost 2 hours on a Merit Center tour. They got a bus ride and a squad car ride, depending on their preference, around what we have right now for a driving track. A few of them took their hand at the driving simulator and crashed our squad car a number of times, but I'm happy to report it won't cost us anything. And then they also did the use of force simulator and then did a tour of the Merit Center. And I have to say that, and again, I mean, who knows exactly how it comes out, but it's part of our pitch to finish out the $2.9 million bonding request and to finish out the driving track and the skid pad. But I thought the attitude, the feedback, and just kind of the general feeling that we got, I think they were appreciative of the tour, and I think they were pretty impressed with the facility, and I'd like to thank our staff people. I'd like to thank the public safety, our law enforcement staff that took part in Jasmine. It was Sergeant Wanker and Corporal Kapitsky that were out there, and then along with Chief Yant, and I thought it was really good. I know David was out there and took part in that also, and I think it was a really good tour, and I'm really glad that our legislators take the time to come out to Marshall and hear our issues and actually see what we're doing out there. So that was very positive. The Southwest Amateur Sports Commission meeting that was supposed to happen at noon today got canceled or postponed. So that's really all I have. Thank you.
One question, Craig. How many senators were out there?
20.
Awesome. Community
there were
service.
20 on the tour. I believe it was 20. I think the number was correct at 20, David. Don't you agree?
I was counting somewhat lower, but we're glad to have all of them.
Okay.
Awesome. My Community Services Advisory Board did not meet. Cable Commission has not yet met, and because of work conflicts, I wasn't able to meet the last EDA, so I defer that to the good man to my far right.
What's that?
It's not you.
Oh.
far right.
Okay. On the, as far as the Public Housing Commission, we met yesterday, and they had the annual check of the fire alarm system, and they go through all the different units and the floors, and after a while some of the residents weren't real happy with all the noise. It just kept going on and on and on, but they did get the alarm systems checked out. We had an open public meeting at Parkview Apartments because we're having a new smoke-free policy, and at the meeting we had 3 individuals show up, and there weren't any real objections to the policy that we know of as far as the people that were at the meeting. After the open public meeting, we did have a business meeting, and they approved the smoke-free policy for all units, and the smoke-free policy is effective July 1st of this year. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. John?
Hey, MMU did meet, but the time interfered with the city council meeting, so ended up on this one. And there is a change to this month's meeting, which also hits on the date of the city council, but it's an hour earlier, so I may be just coming in here at the nick of time on that one. EDA also had met, and we took action regarding the MIF funds. It was just talked about, but in addition to that, there was amendments to the revolving loan policy and the business subsidy policy, the 2 policies that we did have, to align those with the state of the new changes with the state. So ours match up with the state. And that's it.
Okay. And David?
The Convention and Visitors Bureau met on December 21st. Because of a couple of community events, we were shy of a quorum, but we discussed the budget, and then it was subsequently approved by email vote, and then is meeting again on January 18th for some follow-up items. And then the Airport Commission met on January 2nd. Sort of routine oversight of things there.
And Jim?
Mine did not meet.
We will then move to agenda item number 18, council member individual items. Jim, let's start near it.
I'm going to open a can of worms here, but that's all right. I've been on city council for a year now. It's been a good year. And in that years, we've talked about street assessments and how to change them. And nothing has been done on that yet. And I think as a council, we keep talking about it, and that's not who I am. I'm a doer. Let's get it done. So I just want to bring up, before we start our street construction project this spring, we should tackle the assessment project. Are we going to have assessments? You know, John had said, are we going to put it on to the general fund, or are we going to raise sales tax? What, are we going to leave it the same? I think we need to stop talking about it, and we need to do it. We leave it the same, we've done that. We've done something. but we need to address it, and I think we need to address it before we start a street construction and get it out there and get it taken care of instead of talking about it. That's all I have.
Okay. David?
Several things. First, I was cleaning out some things at the end of the year at the office and found a couple of golden oldies. Not one, but 2 copies of the December 5th, 1996, what we used to call the Truth in Taxation hearing. And I'm going to present these more formally at the end of the meeting to both to Carla and to Sharon as something to give them a real sense of the continuity of the work around here. We present the information a little differently now, but it's nice that we have a linkage and an understanding of how we've done this historically. Second, I appreciated the chance to drop by the bonding committee's visit at the Merit Center. I understand from Senator Senjum that they were very well fed at SMSU. That was chiefly the reason for their visit there, though I think President Gore's worked in a concise presentation on HEAPR funding, which is facilities maintenance and repair while they were there. Had a chance to visit with Senator Fong Huaj from east side of St. Paul. I assume he's been to Marshall, but he was very much in a learning mode, and just by chance he was out in the lobby while some of the others were doing one of the simulations, and got quite an interesting opportunity to talk about our city, our region, educate, hopefully in a beneficial way, a senator from an extremely different constituency, about as different as any you could find in the state, but now he comes away knowing a little bit better understanding about what we're concerned with, what we deal with out here. So I was appreciated the chance to do that, just quite by chance. Let's see, tomorrow, speaking of our earlier discussion of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, I'm going to be going into St. Paul. They're doing a series of interviews over a few weeks with the many different candidates running for governor, and they're interviewing or having you might say, a conversation with 3 of them tomorrow. So I'm going to take the opportunity to do that and see what I can say about Southwest Minnesota in that setting. And finally, Dennis, we had a discussion maybe about this time a year ago, this being the first meeting of the year, that language in the charter. You recall this discussion about council members taking office at the first regularly scheduled meeting of the year. What if you've got, it falls on the 13th or 14th as it could, something really needs to happen in the way of a special meeting. And according to the charter, they can't be seated and vote. So we had talked a bit about a very slight change to that provision in the charter, and I wanted to follow up with you at this time of year, and maybe we can get together and get that rolling.
And there's some other franchise language in there that needs to be
Okay.
changed also. So,
Okay.
yeah, we can bundle it all.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. And it would properly go to LNO and then here to this body.
To the Charter Commission.
Well,
And,
sure,
I
why
mean,
not?
There are
Yes.
some charter provisions.
Yeah, that's what they're there for. You're right. So, thank you. That's all.
John?
Hey, for one thing, saw the goals that city administrator put out, and thank you for getting those out. And I think that's something that we as city council need to put together our goals as well. So to kick that off, I kicked out 3 of them that I'd bring up. One is I'd like to see a conclusion on the City Hall building and find out what we're really going to do there. I also think with all the work that we do in quite a few of the areas on the budget, that we would be able to do a full budget projection for 5 years out with including what we're projecting to see for the levies as well. I think that'd be well worth coming up with. We've got Public Works and a number of the other groups do 5-year plans, and we've got a 5-year SIP plan. So I think numbers that we really need to do the projections on are smaller percentage of the budget. And then the last item, actually, Jim, was a subject that's been talked about for more than a year, is a conclusion on how to handle the street assessments. And it is a complex subject, and I think that's something we do need. Last item, just going to mention is if you haven't been out there, the artwork at the Red Baron Arena is installed and it's now lit. I think very impressive. Just as you look at it, take time to drive around the entire as much of the artwork as you can, because the intent on it is the change its prairie roots, and as you go around the sculpture, you'll see the trend of the changing of the colors that mimic the green of the summer, the fall colors as they come in, and the drier yellow colors. So as you rotate around the building, you'll see that progression and how that the grass structure that's there, part of the prairie roots, is in. And when it warms up a little bit and thaws out, get a chance to look down in the center of the sculpture and notice that the layout of the river through the Redwood River that flows through Marshall is represented in the same fashion in the center of the structure. So very neat. Stones for sitting around it, and lit. And when the weather does warm up a little more, we're going to have the actual prairie grass that grows in alongside it. So it's going to be a very impressive sculpture.
Very good. Thank you, John. Greg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the comments about the goal share, and I appreciate the goal sets also. And Jim and John, thanks. I agree. I think we really need to get at a decision about what we're going to do for street and sidewalk assessments, and get a plan and get moving forward and get that done. And then the other thing, I want to take a step back on some comments that were made at our last meeting with the kudos to the Light Up the Night. And we made 2 trips out there afterwards. My wife and I did a cold night date night and did the wagon ride and then walked. And then Christmas Eve, we actually had family home and did it again. Of course, the live nativity, I don't know why the live nativity wasn't there Christmas Eve. I would think of all the nights you'd want baby Jesus there. But anyway, that's just a humorous dig, but it was amazing. And I think it was great. My wife and I could have been the wise grandparents, I guess, if there was such a thing. My wife says I'm not a wise man, I'm a wiseacre. So we'll leave it at that. But I just want to, I know how much, I can understand how much work went into that by the number of individuals. I think that those types of things that happen in this community are just absolutely amazing. And I can't thank the people involved in that, both planning and setting up. And then, of course, the thankless job of taking back down. And I really hope that continues to grow. I think those types of involvements are what makes this community and communities like Marshall so special, and it really makes you proud to be a part of it. And that's really all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Steve?
You guys have taken everything I was going to say, so.
We'll just say ditto.
I'll just say ditto. Yeah, it was the Light Up the Night was really, it would be really interesting to see the numbers on that, if they were even keeping track of how many went through, but that was really neat. The artwork is beautiful. Thank you, Sharon, for your goals, and absolutely kicking the can down the road with the special assessment has got to stop this year. We've got to make it a priority. So that's all.
What?
I have no comment.
A couple of things I would add. Was a couple of big topics that were brought up. With street assessment, and the first issue there is the balance between, ad valorem tax and, what level, which currently that was set by the court at $5,000, and then it's increased inflationary factor, and then the various other funds, enterprise funds, and do we need to do a modification for that? That's a big topic. City Hall is a large topic for discussion, and the prioritization of the council's goals and work sessions. So we're looking at an entire year, not just a single meeting agenda. That's obviously an important task for the council. So what I would, and obviously there's other things that will come up that were brought up, what I would propose is that we do set a time for a work session and try to do that as soon as it can be scheduled, realizing everyone has schedules, so the challenge is always finding an adequate amount of time to do that. So maybe, Sharon, if we could ask staff to, survey the council, find an appropriate time that perhaps we start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then plan to go till about 8, and then, so we have enough time to have some thorough discussion, but also have a structured discussion so we get through everything that needs to be. Would that work for everyone? So then if that's the case, then we'll ask Kathy to work on that.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. And this is the first meeting of the year, so I do look forward to working with this council. We have a committed council that are dedicated to the work of the city marshal. So thank you for serving. With that, I will move to agenda item number 19. Staff report, Sharon.
Mr. Mayor and councilmen, thank you for bringing up a number of items, including City Hall, street assessments, and Mr. Mayor, the idea of a work session, and we will get on that soon to schedule something. And as a follow-up to City Hall, and individual discussions with councilmen, City Hall was a priority, and obviously based on your past action and contracting with an architect, we've made one step in that direction. The architect is willing to also present at a work session if you wish, and I think that might be helpful for the council to kind of meet them and then also hear their background a little bit, because the prior discussions, I believe, was just at the committee level. So it'll be good to get the council's input into how we move forward with that particular project. Just a couple other real quick things. One of the things that, as we go along and I'll learn, is that we do want to present as much information as we can to the council. And one of the items that Councilman Meister actually suggested was, I believe you get a report on how well our liquor store does, but I think maybe it would be good if Carla and Scott can, at some point, once we get the final numbers, just do a presentation to the council. And this last year, obviously, was a little bit different because we had Sunday sales as well, and so hopefully we can do a comparison for the council. You can see how that has worked for the city. So that'll be upcoming. The other discussion that I've been having on a regular basis, and you're aware of this based on my schedule, is meeting with the building inspection department employees. And I stated at prior meeting that effective January 1, that particular department is going to report directly to me. So I've done a lot of one-on-one communication. I've attended their staff meetings, and we've had discussions about better communications and sharing of information and workarounds, meaning that we still want to meet compliance with the building code, but are there ways that we can meet it without just picking on one particular method? And then another word that has been tossed around at the last staff meeting is actually voluntary, and that might be some things that we see come out. But we also know that there is a task force, and the task force has obviously some input and some desire to put forth some ideas as well. So we're definitely taking a look at it, but we want to defer as we go along with the task force, which the next meeting has been scheduled for, I believe, January 16th on that, and I think you all have gotten a meeting notice on that. But I believe in prior years, I don't know if this happened last year, the building inspection department actually did do a report to council on number of building permits and kind of what happened in the prior year. And if that didn't happen in 2017, I think it happened prior to that. But I think that's something that the building inspection department could do it on an annual basis to the council. And that's something that we'll schedule as well as part of a regular city council meeting coming into the future. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're completing the design and bid documents for the MMU parking lot replacement. We're their consultant that puts together the plans and specs and bidding and inspection. They actually contract with us to do that. Also, I don't know if you're aware of it, but we've spent hundreds of hours on the discussion of special assessments going to taxation. and we're probably about 70% complete with that analysis of all the special assessment projects over the last 10 years, putting that together and trying to give you an estimate of what sort of ad valorem you'd have to raise to offset those special assessments. Typically in the past, that's been referred to the PI&T and Ways and Means Committees. But if you're having a general meeting with direction, maybe it should go to the entire council first. It's very significant, the amount of special assessments that have been put in place over the last 10 years. Also, with Carla's review, she does the bonding recommendations. The type of bonding that we have for special assessments is typically different from any other type of bonding. So I don't know how that affects the percentage of interest for the projects if you go under the 20% regularly, and of course it would be under 20%, more like 5%, because we still will have special assessments because of the individual special assessments for private things like your driveway, your walk-up sidewalk, your sanitary sewer service line and connection. So those things would probably still be under special assessments. So we have spent a significant amount of time on that. We have a spreadsheet that's evolving with every project we put on there for the last 10 years. The lowest assessment time was 5 years, generally 8 years, many 10 years, and one that has a 20 or 25-year assessment. So they are spread out over the number of years, the number of amount of time. The amount of interest on each one of those has been calculated as well. So if we go into the, I'll just spend a little time on this. If we go into using ad valorem for all of it, we even have the idea of those who have paid theirs in full. Let's say an assessment last year and you paid it in full. And now you have to start next year with it in your taxes. How do you pay that back or give them a credit for the number of years that they would have had? Like if you're in the 5th year of a 10-year assessment and you're paying your annual assessment, and then you start getting taxed on your general taxation, should that go against your future payments of that? So we have a lot of things to discuss. It's ready to go whenever you guys want to. We have enough information to start the conversation because, you know, we'll spend as much time as you want us to on it. But if you see what the numbers are and you go, we're not going to go this way, we just soon stop what we're doing. But we are continuing to put that together so that you have a good idea of what impact putting it on taxation would be. It will be at least between $750,000 and $1 million a year in ad valorem. So that's just something to think about before you do that. And I'd like to do that at the full council rather than just those two committees to start. That's and then we did have a very good master planning meeting with the Vera Marshall. They have some significant things that they're looking at doing in the short term. First thing you'll see is the relocation of the homes along College Drive, adjacent to Bruce Street. They own all the property. That'll be the first start of changes. That's all I have.
Glenn, I just want to say thank you for explaining what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing a lot of work, and it's really important. This is a big issue, and it's an expensive one, and it's good that you're doing a thorough study, getting all the facts and figures before a decision's made, because we want to make the right decision. And it's important to do your homework first, and I want to thank your staff for doing that.
You're welcome. And we also want to contact the communities that we compare ourselves to get all of their special assessment procedures so that you can see what other towns are doing that we compare ourselves to. We'll have that for you too.
Thank you.
And Dennis.
Pretty much working with the rest of the staff addressing these major issues. Also looking to try to finalize warranty issues out at the Red Baron Arena. So we met with some staff out there and talking about architectural and other issues to deal with them.
Very good. So then we'll move to agenda item number 22, the pending agenda items. Any questions about the pending agenda items? Otherwise, the agenda item number 23, the information items. Agenda item number 24, the upcoming meetings, which brings us to adjourning. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Thank you for not allowing me to speak. I'm surprised that we don't have anybody on the council to witness for downtown Marshall. It's always these external things. You have the Red Baron thing and the little people that ride their bikes downtown to get things. I don't think they go out there. You missed the point years ago about having music downtown, and somebody says, "Oh, you got to be religious. You can't offend somebody." I think if we had some music on the Memorial Park area, we would add a drawing card for people coming into town, give them a little extra step. But this has been ignored, and I fault the council for not really thinking about downtown in any of your descriptions here with all these external things. And I still love downtown. And so I think you should get your act together and do a little bit more for downtown, at least consider some discussions on it. So I'll say more at another time, but you know me.
Would entertain a motion to adjourn?
Second. Or I make the motion.
Motion by Jim.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Craig to adjourn. Discussion. We'll move to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.